Here's the difference. Shaq is rich. The white man that signs his check is wealthy. I'm not talking about rich, I'm talking about wealth. I ain't talking about Oprah, I'm talking about Bill Gates, okay? If Bill Gates woke up tomorrow with Oprah's money, he'd jump out a window.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. Nothing like a little Chris Rock to start things off, huh? Today on the show, I talk with Charles Duhigg. He's the author of best-selling books like The Power of Habit and Super Communicators, How to Unlock the Secret Language of Connection. He won a Pulitzer Prize in 2013 for his series of articles investigating the business practices of Apple and other big tech companies. And he's also just a fun guy to talk with because he's curious about the world. He's interested in asking questions, which I've heard is a handy skill when you're a reporter. And I've talked with Charles before. I didn't realize that he's one of 10 children. Yeah, he's the 7th of 10 children in his family. He grew up in New Mexico. Dad was a lawyer. And as you're about to hear, the Duhigg family had some pretty interesting conversations around the dinner table that revolved around money. So let's get to it with Charles Duhigg. What is your earliest memory of money?
Growing up in Albuquerque, we were solidly middle class, but we were surrounded by a lot of families and kids who weren't middle class, who were poor. And so I always felt like we were pretty wealthy as a result of that. But definitely, my father was an attorney, and he was a trial lawyer. And so his income would be relatively sort of spiky, right? If he settled a case, there was money coming in. And if he hadn't settled anything lately, there wasn't. And so there was definitely a couple of times where I wanted to do things. Like I qualified for the national debate tournament and couldn't go to it in high school because he was just like, I don't have enough cash right now to buy that ticket and make that happen. So money was definitely something that I knew had impacts on people's lives. The other thing is that my dad talked a lot about money. And the reason he talked about money was because as a trial lawyer, he would talk about his work. And what you do as a trial lawyer, particularly if you do something like medical malpractice or, injuries, is you try and put a financial number on something that happens in life. So he would come home and say things like, over the dinner table, let's say I have a client who came in and he lost his hand at work. So how much do you think his hand is worth, right? If I go to a jury, I have to ask them for a dollar amount. And so we would sort of debate that and he'd say, well, let's say it's his left hand and he's right-handed. Should he get more or less for that? And that was kind of a fun topic of conversation because it sort of gets to what money is, that money itself is not particularly valuable, but as a fungible means, as a way for us to take events in life and try and put some relative value on them, it can be a really useful tool. We eventually got to a point, there was a famous Supreme Court decision in New Mexico about a nun who had been killed in a car accident where the accident was the other person's fault. And so her estate sued the other person. And the argument that the defense was making on behalf of the person who had killed the nun was she took a vow of poverty. So actually her future life calculation is relatively low. And the court ended up saying, no, there's actually this thing known as hedonic value that we are going to put a dollar amount on. And so simply depriving someone of life, even if they don't have any future earning capacity, their life inherently has financial value. And so we would talk about that, right? How do you assign value to a life? Should a nun get less money if she's killed than a banker? And so we talked about money a lot. And so as a result, I kind of became fluent in money. I became very comfortable talking about money. And I think that's really served me well because I think many people, they avoid thinking or talking about money just because it's uncomfortable or unfamiliar to them. So I try and do the same thing with my kids. I talk about money all the time so that it just becomes something that's normal.
That's amazing. And you're absolutely correct. If this show is any indication, the overwhelming majority of guests have talked about their experience growing up, which is very close to my experience growing up, which is money isn't really talked about. It's,
Right.
every now and then it will come up, but it is not methodically discussed in the way that your father brought it up. So that's absolutely to the benefit of you and your siblings. It's a separate question whether it's appropriate dinner table conversation to talk about someone who lost their hand. That's a whole separate thing. I'm guessing like maybe your mom or someone else was like, really? We're talking about this at dinner?
No, they were into it. Everyone, it's a kind of interesting topic. And actually, we'll do this thing with my kids where like, if we go out to dinner together and the bill comes, I ask them to guess like what the bill total is. And the reason there is kind of twofold. First, I want them to sort of just be aware that, their parents are spending money on their behalf, right? But secondly, like it forces them to think about what things cost. And they all know they cannot ask me to buy them something without being able to tell me precisely how much it'll cost. Like if they come and they say, I want X, and I say, how much does it cost? And they say, I don't know, then that means they're definitely not going to get X. And I just think it's like, we would never say that it's completely responsible to tell your kids once about table manners, to say like once, like you should use your napkin and then never bring it up again. And because then they wouldn't learn the lesson. But we tend to treat things like sex and money that way, right? Where we have one conversation about it.
We're just going to talk about this once and we'll never speak of it again.
Yeah. And that does not mean that as a parent, I think you're fully giving your kids the best leg up in life.
What was the first job you had when you were a kid?
Oh, so when I was in elementary school, I sold stickers at like a 300% markup. So, and then the school found out I was doing that and they told me I had to stop. But then the first real job I had is that I was a Kelly temp girl. The college before I went to summer, I needed to earn some money. And so I went to Kelly Temp, which I don't even know if like Kelly really exists anymore as a company. Cause
I don't know that it does. So it's a temp agency?
It's a temp agency. Yeah. And they placed me at this adult literacy program where I was basically the like receptionist. And that was the first real job that I had.
What do you remember about the job?
Not that much, mostly that it was kind of boring. It was inspiring to like help people learn to read, but it was super duper boring work. And I was like, I'm glad I'm going to college because I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. I'd like to find something else.
So you go to Yale University.
Yep.
Do I have this right? Degree in history?
Yeah.
What made you choose that?
Oh, I just fell in love with intellectual history. I actually went in as an econ major. And thought the econ classes were fine. But then I took a couple of intellectual history classes and just thought they were fascinating. And so I decided to do that.
Was the plan, I'm just going to do this because I'm interested in this? Or was the plan at the time, this is really interesting to me. I'll get a degree in history and maybe that's where my career goes. I'm a history professor or something like that.
No, not at all. I mean, I think at that point, so this is the 90s at Yale. So it's a very intellectual environment. There were a couple of kids who like wanted to go into investment banking and everyone was like, oh, investment banking, why would you do that? And so of course those kids like went on to do very, very well. And they knew a lot more than we did about how the world worked. But in general, my feeling was that, I wasn't like a math genius. I wasn't particularly good at or interested in comp sci. And so I thought that getting a degree that taught me critical thinking would actually be the most valuable thing. And, a lot of people went on to be consultants, right? That's a very useful use of that. I went on to start a company and then eventually become a journalist. And I think in general, this is true. And now I will say, I think this applies much more to if you're pretty smart to begin with, then it doesn't really matter what you major in because you're going to find a way to find your path. I think for folks whom have less opportunities, choosing the right major can be much more important. But I was lucky in that respect that nobody really cared what you majored in at Yale. They just cared that you went to Yale.
So having said all that, do you remember what thinking led you to go to Harvard to get an MBA?
Oh, yeah. So I graduated from Yale and I moved to Cairo for a year with my now wife, then girlfriend. And then I moved back to Albuquerque to start a company. And I started a company with my father, building medical education programs in underserved areas and partnerships with universities, which actually was fairly lucrative. After about 2 years of doing that, I realized I really didn't know what I was doing when it came to business. And I wanted to get a graduate degree of some kind. So I applied to law schools and to business schools, and luckily got into Harvard Business School. And they actually gave me a great deal where basically I didn't have to pay any tuition because, I was starting this company. I had started this company that was like, it wasn't a non-for-profit, but it sort of had a non-profit sheen to people. It looked like it was a socially motivated company, which it was in some respects because New Mexico has a problem with primary care providers, and we wanted to help solve that. But it was also a profitable company, but HBS thought like, oh, he's not a typical applicant, and so they gave me this great deal, and I was able to graduate. I mean, I still had about $80,000 in debt when I graduated from HBS, but that's much less than it would have been if I'd gone to law school.
How many people get a Harvard MBA and then go into journalism? Because I'm guessing you're on a pretty small list.
Yeah, there's like 2 other people. And for the first 7 years after I graduated from HBS, I was the lowest paid member of my class. All of my friends basically used HBS the way you're supposed to use HBS, which is to like get into like a high paying industry, whether that be private equity or, banking or consulting. I decided to become a journalist. But what happened is that about halfway through the first year of business school, we ended up selling the company that I had started to our partners. And so suddenly the whole reason I'd gone to business school to come back and run this company and make it a big success, we sold the company. And so there was nothing tying me to coming back to it. And at the same time, I was trying to decide whether to come back to New Mexico because I was thinking of going into politics. So I spent the summer between my first and second year where you get an internship in business school. And typically you get an internship from the company you hope will hire you. I spent that summer working for a private equity group in New Mexico, a wonderful guy named Jim Long, and who did real estate private equity. And what would happen is I would come in every day. It was my job basically to make models, right? Like here's a property, let's model it out. Here's the price we'd possibly pay. You go through like 100 of those and maybe you find one property where the numbers make sense to you that you might want to put in an offer. And so it's fairly repetitive, not the most exciting work on the face of the planet. And so what I would do to sort of make my days a little bit more exciting is I'd let myself listen to one episode of This American Life every day. And then if it was a really tough day, I could listen to 2 episodes of This American Life. Because this is pre-iPhone, but it's you could listen on your computer. And at the end of the summer, I kind of realized like if the best part of my day was listening to This American Life, then I should probably go make This American Life episodes or go be a journalist rather than being a private equity guy, because that just seems like it would hold my attention and my curiosity for a lot longer. And so that's what I did. I spent second year of business school preparing for a career in journalism.
Well, and even though, as you said, you end up graduating from Harvard with this MBA, you're the lowest paid member of your class for several years. Between that education at Harvard and what you said about how money was talked about constantly in your home, it sounds like you were weirdly and wonderfully fluent in the language of both business and money. And
absolutely.
I'm assuming that served you well when you went out to be a reporter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. The first job I got as a journalist was an intern at the Washington Post on the business section. And I've basically been a business reporter for my entire life by choice. My books aren't necessarily seen immediately as business books, but if you read them, there's a lot of business in them. And I really like being a business reporter. I think that business reporting is the most important type of reporting you can do because you can actually change the world much faster through business reporting than through any other kind of reporting. I was a war correspondent for a little while. Nobody cared. Like, you write the articles and they all say it's terrible and nobody does anything. Even if you're covering politics, like, there's so many forces. But if a company is doing something wrong and I write about them for the front page of the New York Times, that company is likely either going to change or it's going to get a lot of regulator scrutiny on it. So you actually have an outsized influence as a business reporter. And so that's what I spent most of my career doing at newspapers, was writing about businesses. And I still do that for the New Yorker.
So one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I started podcasting in 2009. I've done thousands of interviews, and of those interviews, hundreds of them have been with authors. Mm-hmm. And you are the only author I have ever talked with when I asked you about your first book and said, what made you want to write this book? You're the only author who ever said to me, I needed the money.
Yeah, no, I absolutely needed the money. But we were about to have our first kid when I wrote the proposal, and I had $40,000 in savings, and we lived in New York City, and we were doing fine, right? I was working at the New York Times. Like, we could definitely live. Like, we weren't, but I didn't have any savings, and we were about to have a child, and I was like, okay, I gotta go make money now. And so one of the reasons I wrote The Power of Habit, and I spent about a year and a half writing that proposal and really honing down what the topic of it was, right? Like focusing in, deciding that habits is the focus. One of the reasons why was because I was really, really fascinated in it. But the other reason why is because I hoped that a lot of other people would be fascinated in it as well and would give me their $13.95 to buy the book. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I wrote a book.
So you're at this point in your career now where I'm guessing, to a large extent, if not to a complete extent, you can pick and choose what you want to write about. And I'm curious the extent to which money factors into those decisions, because I have a little bit of experience dealing with people in the book publishing industry. And I'm willing to bet that there have been times where you have an idea for something and the publisher or your agent is like, no, that's not going to sell. Like, you write a sequel to The Power of Habit. Do that, that sort of thing.
That actually doesn't happen very much.
Thank God.
So I would say, I've been very fortunate in that, like, the books I've written have done well. And I do a lot of speaking, which is great. And so I don't have to I also sort of invest on my own, which has worked out well. So I don't really have to make many decisions based on kind of maximizing paycheck. And I've actually found in the past when I have taken money into account, it tends to push me to make worse choices. But what is true is that the work that I do, I always have a standard in my head, which is I want at least 1 million people to read something I write. Right? So if it's a book, I want to sell 1 million copies at the very least. If it's an article I write, I want there to be 1 million people who visit that page and actually sort of, get deep into the article. And so I don't think about money, but I do think about impact. And as a result, money and impact, they tend to go somewhat hand in hand, right? If you find something that 1 million people want to read, you're probably going to do okay financially on it. And so I go through a lot of book ideas and share them with my editor, and we discuss them, and we decide for whatever reason, like, that's not the right book to work on right now, or it needs to get polished more. But it's not because, like, I'm trying to find the topic that is the most remunerative. It's because I'm trying to find the topic that I think people want to read about and that I can write about in a new and interesting way.
Coming up, we've got the speed round, but first, have you tried Marmar yet? It's my favorite chili garlic crunch, and I've tried the others. The ones that you see in the grocery store, I've tried those. And you know what? They're fine. They're fine. But here's the thing. I don't know about you. I don't want my food to be just fine. I want my food to be amazing and delicious. And once I tried Marmar, there was no way I was going back to those other ones. It has great flavors. It mixes well into sauces and spreads. It's so versatile. You can try it with pretty much anything and see if you don't love it. Go to ilovemarmar.com, use the promo code MONEY, get 10% off, and then you're off to the races. Try it with anything. Get this stuff in your kitchen. Click the link in the show notes or go to ilovemarmar.com. Get 10% off when you use the promo code MONEY. Make your taste buds happy, people. All right, let's get back to Charles. You mentioned earlier that your then girlfriend went with you to Cairo.
Yeah.
Now your wife. How much did the two of you talk about money before you got married?
A pretty good amount, just in that we both were poor. She's a PhD. She was in a PhD program. So like we didn't have a lot of money and we were actually living apart before and after we got married. And so like we would have to buy tickets to go see each other or figure out like, should I drive? I remember one day, like Southwest, I was living in Los Angeles. I was working at the LA Times, and Liz, my now wife, was living up in Monterey Bay. She was going to grad school. And Southwest had this deal where for $49, you could fly from LA to San Jose, but it was like only like available for 12 hours. And so I bought something like 30 tickets. Like I just went online and bought all these tickets. And then it turns out I had actually screwed it up. I actually got like the wrong ticket. So I had to like return all of them and do it. So we thought about money a good amount, or talked about money a good amount, not in like a panicked or anxious way, just more like, hey, here's where we're at. And we still do. So I have this spreadsheet that every single week I update with all of our bank balances, all of our investment balances, how much we've spent in the last week, how much we've spent on credit cards. It takes me like 10 minutes, but it's not that big a deal. And that's a spreadsheet that she or my kids can access anytime. So they could tell you what our net worth is at any moment. And they could see, how much debt we have and how much we have in various kinds of retirement accounts. Because I'm kind of into it, my wife doesn't spend that much time on it, to be honest with you, because she knows that I'm taking care of it and she doesn't need to. But she also runs a big lab at her university where she has a big budget that she manages very actively. And so I don't know. I like talking about money. Like, I think money's interesting and I think it's fun. And again, like I said, it's this way of talking about how we can compare things that are somewhat dissimilar, right? Like, how much would I charge you for like an hour of mowing your lawn versus how much would I charge you for an hour of reading you a book? So if the prices there are different, if I'm going to charge you $100 to mow your lawn and $20 to read you a book because I enjoy reading more than I enjoy mowing, money becomes this way for us to say like, well, is 100 to 20, is that the right ratio? Like, and so I just think that's interesting because we spend a lot of time in life trying to make choices about how to use our time or how to use our resources. And money is an easy way of comparing things that are hard to compare otherwise.
I think that's absolutely true. And I'm also interested in the things that people will pay more money for and what they will pay less money for, what they won't pay more money for. I have a couple of friends who like to travel, but they look at hotel rooms themselves as a waste of money. They're like, why would I spend a lot of money on a hotel room? I'm going to be asleep for 7 or 8 hours. I'm spending money on the travel. I'm spending money on the experience in the location I'm going to. I'm not going to spend a lot on that hotel room.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we just went to Morocco. We did a family trip to Morocco and just got back a couple of weeks ago. And we like to travel. We do like a big trip once a year. So I'm kind of the opposite, which is that like, I think spending money on a hotel is really worth it, particularly when you're traveling with your kids, just because like, it's just easy and it's comfortable. And like, but on the other hand, like I do not splurge on plane tickets because I'm like, it's like 7 or 14 hours. Like you can definitely suffer through like an uncomfortable chair for 7 or 14 hours, And so I think that you're exactly right. I think that actually when we talk about money, what we talk about is, what do we value in the world and what do we value in our lives? And my kids might come out at a different place. Like one of my sons, he loves to buy like the high fashion. Like he likes to get clothes that are really like, and I'm like, that's such a total waste of money. Like I don't care about it. But it clearly brings him pleasure, right? It's something that he does see value in. And so he uses his own money to do it. And I think that that's good. Like, I don't think that when we're teaching lessons to our kids about spending, I don't think the goal is to teach them what they ought to spend on and what they shouldn't spend on. I think the goal is to teach them to be thoughtful about their spending and make sure that what they are spending on actually aligns with their desires and their values.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing that you have bought that makes you happy?
Oh, art. I buy lots of, not lots of art. I buy art sometimes, and it is, we don't even have enough room on our walls for all of it, but it makes me very happy.
Is it locally that you're shopping, or is it part of the travel experience where
it's
we're in Morocco?
It's very episodic. So like I was walking across Montreal because I was giving a speech there, and a woman was carrying a painting, and I realized I owned a print of that painting. And so I stopped her and then like eventually bought the painting from her. When we were in Morocco, I actually bought a painting in Morocco, but it was because I really liked the painting. Like I just really liked the idea of it. So sometimes it's local, sometimes it's tied to travel, but what it's always tied to is it's tied to some kind of story that seems meaningful to me.
Not to focus on the wrong thing here, but that woman in Montreal. So did you show up to your speech with a painting under your arm?
No. I got her information. I ended up buying it, and then they shipped it to me. Yeah. No, it's a wall-sized painting. It's enormous. So, but it's beautiful. I love it.
Have you ever made a purchase that you regret and sometimes you still think about it?
I make purchases I regret all the time. We're doing a home renovation right now. And like every single time I spend money on something, I'm like, is this going to be the one I regret 3 years from now, where we like spent too much, we didn't spend enough? I'm trying to think if any stand out in my head as being, I can't think of any. I mean, I will say my dad, again, was raising 10 children, and that's an expensive proposition. And he once told me he was talking to someone and something had come up, some opportunity, and they wanted to do it, but it was expensive. And he was like, look, if you've got the money, just spend it. Like it's only money, right? So like, I tend not to remember, I tend not to think a lot about what I spent on that I regret, except to like make a little mental note, like, let's not do that again.
What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself, not for your wife or your kids, just you?
Oh, it was probably this painting that I got in Morocco. It ended up being a little bit more expensive than I thought it was going to be. Like I thought I could get it for like $600 or $700, and I think it ended up being like $2,000. And then it's like another, I don't know, $500 to get it stretched. So it's not huge. It's not like it wasn't a huge expenditure, but it was definitely like enough that I was like, like $2,500 is not something that like I do without reason. But I'd say that's probably the biggest splurge. What
is one thing that you wish you knew earlier about money?
I wish I had known that if you like money and money is a priority for you, it will definitely come into your life. Like there was definitely a period before I wrote my first book when I was stressed about money. Like I would lose sleep over money and try and figure out like, how am I going to pay for like, we have $40,000 in savings in New York. Like how can I ever buy a house? And if at that moment someone had said to me, look, like if you care about money, if it's a priority for you, you're definitely going to make money. It's the people who like, for whom it's not a priority and they don't really care about it that much. They're the ones who end up not making as much money, but they don't care, right? Because there's other things that they prioritize above money. And so that's the thing I wish I had known is that it will come your way in ways that you don't expect. The other thing, frankly, is that I spent a lot of time investing with like big fancy like funds and stuff like that, and investing with friends who ran like real things. It's so much better to invest with your friends. Like it's so much better to invest with like a financial advisor that like and like and you have some real relationship with. One of my friends started an energy hedge fund and I invested in that. That's a much better use of money. The returns are higher.
What is a charitable cause that you'd like to support?
Oh, so I donate $50,000 a year to a scholarship for booksellers that provides a fund for them to go finish their first book. So that's something that like I really, really like doing. And then what else? We support the Boys and Girls Club here in Santa Cruz. We usually give money to education, particularly to community colleges that really do like God's work, working with students who that education makes all the difference. And so those are the things that I like to give. Our goal is to give 10% of post-tax income each year to charity.
Do you have a favorite movie or television show that has money as a through line?
There's that movie, Other People's Money.
Danny DeVito.
With Danny DeVito, which I haven't seen in so long, so I don't even know if it's good. But there is this line from it that I think is hilarious that I say all the time, which is like, everyone loves money. That's why they call it money.
I'm sorry to have to correct you here, but Danny DeVito says that line. He says it in a different movie.
Oh, he does? What movie is it?
He says it in the movie Heist with Gene Hackman.
Oh, see, there you go. There you go. So I don't even remember what movie it was, but yes, I love that line.
An all-time great line. The last thing is what I call a penny for your thoughts. And this is just any bit of wisdom that you've picked up throughout your life that you want to share with people who are listening. It can be about money, but it doesn't have to be. It can be about anything.
Yeah. And I think particularly this is true for young people, but it's true for all of us. I think the other mistake that I made is I think you should go into making big decisions assuming that A, you will be more successful than you anticipate you will be, but B, it will take far, far longer than you anticipate it, right? So if you want to run for Senate or you want to be a politician, just assume eventually you're going to be a senator, but that it's going to take 30 or 40 years to get there. Or if you want to be a book author, just assume that you're going to end up writing a bestseller, but that it's going to take 2 or 3 books until it happens. And that you'll need to learn and change every single year as you get exposed to what the market and the world is telling you about what you're doing. That's the advice I always give young people, is just because there's so much uncertainty, there's so much shying away from a certain path because it seems unlikely that it will work out. And the truth of the matter is that if you're dedicated and you're smart and you love that thing, it will eventually work out. You will figure out a way to make this work, but it'll take longer than you anticipate it will. So if you're doing it because you think it's a get rich quick, it's not going to be quick. So make sure that you choose something that you love enough that you can commit to it for long enough until it does become a success.
There you go. Charles Duhigg's latest book is Super Communicators: How to Unlock the Secret Language of Connection. It came out last year, became a New York Times bestseller, and ended up on a bunch of those best of 2024 lists. He's a great writer, so check it out. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.